what my granddaddy taught me to do.
Don't forget what we did today. Today is history.
As a black man, I stand up for black women.
Why is everybody, why is the police fighting against us, but they're supposed to be helping us? That doesn't make sense.
Live it!
That being the Victims Fund, call-in and customer notifications and outreach. Before I get into those, though, I did want to do a general overview of what GVI is. And so GVI stands for Group Violence Intervention. It's an operational approach to reduce violence, and it is meant to build trust between the community and criminal justice agencies, like a local police department. It aims to enhance legitimacy by explicitly breaking with past practices of over-enforcement and under-protection that communities have seen from law enforcement in the past. And one of the aims for GVI is for people to understand that communities in and of themselves are not dangerous. It's actually a small group of individuals within these communities that drive the violence. I believe NNSC has a stat that states that within a community, it's really just about 10 to 11% that's actually part of driving the violence, and it's an even smaller group of people that are pushing those people to continue the violence. One of the features of GVI is that it conducts outreaches to this population through call-ins, custom notifications, and outreach. And one thing I want to emphasize from John J. from NNSC is that the custom notification and outreach is really the bread and butter of GVI. The call-in is important, it's an important tool, but that day-to-day outreach that is done is what builds trust between the community and the agencies. GVI uses law enforcement sanctions as strategically as possible. And the last point I want to make is that the main goal is to see all these people safe, alive, and free. So first off, I just want to give a brief overview of the Victims Fund and where we're at. So the Victims Fund was set up to aid families identified through GVI with temporary emergency housing, counseling, and other services that they would need. As of right now, the Memorandum of Understanding for the Victims Fund has been signed by all parties, that being Game Changers and Volunteers of America, as well as Metro Government. And it has been reviewed and edited. There's also been a first draft of the SOP done, and the next steps is to get that finalized with all partners, including a form that people will fill out to get the funding. Next, I want to talk about the call-in. So first, I just want to express what a call-in is. And so it's a face-to-face meeting with law enforcement representatives, community figures, social service providers, and group-involved individuals, usually on probation and parole. The primary purpose is to deliver a key message clearly to these group members, and then through them, they do that back to the groups and the communities that they live in. Currently, we are working with probation and parole to encourage probationers to participate with our call-ins. We have incorporated faith-based partners as part of that outreach so that it can be more effective to get those that we call in to come to the meetings. And in addition to that, we have also met with judges and prosecutors to ensure requirement for probationers to come to the call-in as part of their probation on the front end. So customs and outreach, custom notification is a home visit to those who are impact players and drivers of violence in the community. The point of custom notification is to deliver its earnest message to them personally and also see if they would want to have services provided for them. To date, we have done over 91 custom notifications with just a 9% recidivism rate, which is people who have been victimized or have reoffended. Last month, I did a test trial, really just looking at people we did outreach to between April 1st to the end of May 31st. And so about 14 individuals. Of the 14 individuals, only 2 requested services in office safety and healthy neighborhoods, assisted them getting jobs at Reynolds. And I just want to highlight that just to state that with this population, you have to make more than one outreach. So there has to be multiple touches, multiple outreaches to this population. One, to foster trust and build that with them, but also with their households and the community. Just doing one touch, they're not going to take you up on services. You need to build that trust. And so just in summary, one thing I just want to highlight is that we're working to ensure that the victims plan is completed, and that we're continuing to work with our partners on call-ins as well as custom outreach. Thank you.
Thank you, and let the record reflect we've been joined by Dr. Councilwoman Barbara Shanklin, and that Councilwoman Madonna Flood has an excused absence. Thank you very much for your presentation. I read David Kennedy's book in 2011, and GVI, Group Violence Intervention, is a carrot stick program. I heard a lot of carrot in your presentation, and I'd be interested to hear about the stick. Do we have people that are not playing along, that are continuing to be involved in a life of violence after these services are offered? What are we doing with those people? Are we following the book with those people, which lays out very clear that those people get the heat of state, local, and federal law enforcement when they have disregarded the services that have been made available to them?
In short, I would say yes. LMPD has done several enforcement actions on certain groups such as E-Block, EST. They're following up with these individuals that are driving violence, and they can speak to it better.
Okay, and I do have another follow-up, because in Kennedy's book, it cites very specifically law enforcement, prosecutors, at not only the local level and our Verbiage County Attorney, but the Commonwealth's Attorney and the United States Attorney, Probation and Parole. Out of the people I've listed, who is the one that's the most difficult to get along with in this process, or not playing along with in this process, or are they all playing very, very well?
They're all playing very well. I know with Probation and Parole, we met with them on a call-in. They legally can't mandate people to come, but they have been willing to work with us in every avenue that they can. That's included playing the call-in we did in January in their local facilities, as well as offering to have us come to jails to speak to them as well about GBI. And so wherever there have been shortcomings, we have worked with all partners to overcome them.
Okay, thanks. And to be honest with you, Probation and Parole being a breakdown is what I've heard. When you have the GBI meetings, are they, is that time well spent?
What do you mean? Like,
With all the partners around the table, actively engaging in information exchange and actively working toward making GBI a success. And
it is. Every Friday we do a community shooting review with various partners where we go over incidences from the past week, and we all collaborate and speak in those meetings about what's going on in the community and how we can best address them. We also had a weekly meeting on Thursday with someone from NNSC, Paul Smith, where we talk and strategize on there as well. So, yeah, it's going well.
thank you, Andre. Next in the queue is President David James. President James.
Thank you, and thank you for being here, and thank you for all the work that you're doing. I want to go back to the follow-up on Sheriff Fox's question about probation and parole. You said that they can't legally require them to do that. Whose opinion is that?
Theirs. It's based off their attorneys. They look over that, and that's what they presented to us.
Right. Does anybody else have a different opinion?
Yes.
Who? Everybody?
Yes.
So what I would say is, when you come here, please be transparent. Okay. So the reality is probation parole is not cooperating. Is that accurate?
I wouldn't say so. They are working with us wherever they can, and we are working on the front end with judges and prosecutors to go around that.
That's before they get sentenced. But for the people that are on parole now, they are not requiring them to come to the call-in. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And they're doing that of their own free choosing. Is that correct?
I wouldn't state it that way. They legally feel that they can't do it, and so in order to make that change, we would have to pursue legal avenues in doing that. So.
And are we doing that?
No.
Why?
Well, we just decided to work with them in other ways, and they go around in other ways instead of trying to get the law changed and strain that relationship with them.
So we're going to try to get the law changed, to get probation and parole to work with us, to try to keep our community safe.
We can, I don't have an answer to that right now.
But that's not one of the intentions of the administration at this particular point. Is that what you're saying? Mr. Talley?
Mr. Talley.
Good afternoon, Keith Talley, currently a consultant with GDI for Metro Government. And just a couple of things I want to just make sure we're clarified on. So we understand working with parole and probation, we're really working with two entities. We're working with Frankfurt, we're working with our local folks. And so I just want to be clear that our work with our local parole and probation folks has been outstanding. They've come to the table, they try to offer solutions, work around, they've been very creative and supportive in doing what they can do from this end, since what Frankfurt has said is that they cannot mandate participation by their clients in the call-ins. And it's a legal question that folks are on both sides of, and without a change of the law, they're going to follow what their legal counsel in Frankfurt is telling them, which is they cannot mandate. So that's where we're currently stuck, and just working really hard to find ways to work around that. And I think the best way going forward is the work that Don is doing in terms of meeting with the judges. We've had good meetings with Judge Perry, and having the judges mandate that on the front end, and then Don did the training for the Commonwealth attorneys for Tom Lyons' office, and so those prosecutors will then make that a part of their agreements when they have folks go through. And so we'll reach a point where as folks go through the system, they will be mandated on the front end to attend GBI, and with parole and probation won't have a point of contention with whether or not they attend or not.
I appreciate that, but that could be 20 years from now. Is that correct?
No, I mean, it's going on now. These judges from this point forward, Judge Perry said that's what they will do in their office, and then prosecutors will work. So it will actually help them pretty quickly for those folks that are coming into the system, which basically, unfortunately, happens every day.
Right, but those for those that are coming into the system, for those that are already in the system,
we're doing it the way that Don here described. We're trying to work around it. They're making so our local probation and parole folks, they understand the issue, and so the head of that area is reaching out personally to each person that's on that call-in list. Don Trey and I will reach out and meet with those people personally. And a lot of that is to make them understand that this is not a scam, this is not a got you, and so we can get folks to show up at the call-in. And so we're working from that end, and then we're using some other incentives trying to get folks to that table.
and will there be any effort this fall to have the law changed when we go into session in Frankfurt this year?
I can't speak to that directly, no, I don't know.
But would it help?
But that would be the way to make that instantaneous in terms of having folks attend the call-in, yes.
Or to get a new commissioner of probation and parole? Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Talley. I will remind those listening in, and I'm not a lawyer, I don't profess to be, but it's called a condition of parole, and you can lay conditions for parole pretty much anywhere you want to lay conditions for parole, but please don't interpret this as you guys getting beat up over an agency that's not yours. That's certainly not the case, but it may be we are in a good position legislatively to make this change happen, because like you said, the great legal lines are split on this. You know, it may very well be, we just need to float a case and get a court ruling and see where it stands. But I would also suggest, as a voting member of the Louisville Metro Crime Commission, that you work through them in advancing this thing. There was an email yesterday for their legislative priorities for the 2023 session, and I think this certainly merits being on there. One quick question, and I'm going to hold to my own timeline. Let me make sure I don't have any of my members in the queue, because I would like to go just slightly deeper into the judiciary. Group violence intervention is only as good as when we get bad guys off the street, or our Chief Shields officers get bad guys and trigger pullers off the street, that they stay off the street. They stay off the street. And that is squarely on the judiciary. And the public needs to know that. You know, when these men and women sometimes get sentenced, they need to get long sentences if they're hurting people. How's it working with the judicial partners?
I think it's going well. I know at the call-in that Commonwealth Attorney and U.S. Attorney mentioned the mandatory minimums that they would go for in going after these individuals, and I know that they've held to that and will hold to that. And so, as far as that goes, I think it's going well, and we are still working and talking with judges about GBI on that end.
Thank you very much, President James.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. DeAndre, I just want to reiterate what Councilman Fox just says, that debate there is not directed towards you or Mr. Talley, it's directed towards Frankfurt.
I understand. I appreciate y'all. You're on the governance committee board, so it's all good for stuff going on.
Thank you.
Thank you, President James. And again, as legislative operators for the city of Louisville, we have very good interaction with our state partners and with our governor's office. And we need to go to Frankfurt or pick up the phone. We'd be more than happy to do that. All you got to do is let us know what fight needs to be fought. So thank you again for being here, and we'll see you at the next update.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Chief Shields, you're on.
Good afternoon, Erika Shields, Chief of Police, the Louisville Police Department. Thank you for allowing me to be here today to speak on our preparations within LMPD for mass shooting incidents, active shooter incidents, as it pertains to government buildings, businesses, schools, you name it. It's obviously gotten far more complicated over the years as we're seeing so many more areas become targets, whether it's initially the schools, religious institutions, concerts, grocery stores, malls, and unfortunately the list just goes on and on. I hate that I come here on the heels of three high-profile mass shooting incidents. Buffalo, Highland Park, and Raleigh. And unfortunately, I may be forgetting one, which says a lot about the state of where we are. I feel like LMPD is doing a large amount correctly, but I will also tell you that I have spent the last 2 days with any of my free time reviewing the Texas House of Representatives after action report on Uvalde, and specifically Robb Elementary. And it's been alarming. It was an absolute epic failure on so many fronts by law enforcement. And what I would submit is that for any agency who thinks that it wouldn't happen to them, that's arrogant, and you're not doing your community a service. This is Texas. The Texas where they shoot first and then ask questions. And yet somehow 376 officers and 23 agencies stood by while this unfolded. That's in a state that is largely thought of as being pro-gun, pro-training, pro-police. So what happened? What was the disconnect? And this document has been invaluable for seeing deficiencies that occurred there, which potentially could occur for us. I want to believe we will never be so incompetent. But I also know without training and demanding excellence, we won't know. So I have here today, we have two main components as we prepare for mass shootings, active shooting incidents. The one is our Homeland Security unit. The Homeland Security unit is really the intel gathering and dissemination unit of our department. What they will do is they will identify threats, perceived threats. They'll interview the individuals for individual, and they'll assess the veracity of the threat and whether there is potentially violence associated with it. They work closely with the Kentucky Intel Fusion Center along with the Joint Terrorism Task Force, which is a federal agency. So that's really our intel component. Then we have the operational component, which is our SWAT team. And they do the actual hands-on training and the scenarios and really getting the boots on the ground. How will we physically respond? So if it's all right with you, Councilman, I would like to have allowed Detective Clem to speak briefly on the Homeland Security piece and Lieutenant Lauder to speak briefly on the SWAT piece. If that's acceptable?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Thank you, Detective Clem. Don't ramble, we'll call you out.
Please state your name for the record and don't ramble.
Yes. My name is Preston Clem. I'm a detective with the LMPD's Homeland Security Unit. And so our unit, as Chief Shields said, is the unit that is responsible for investigating threats against businesses. We focus on threats against violence. So that involves school threats as well, threats against infrastructure. And we do that through a multidisciplinary team approach. We've learned that a lot of times law enforcement action isn't necessarily what people need. Maybe they need mental health treatment or something else, some other kind of community support. So we're able to work with our partners in the community to try to provide that while also assessing their threat levels and everything like that. And we are working towards doing, Department of Homeland Security has a behavior, threat, and risk management concept. So our department recently attended some training with our unit to try to move more towards that concept and looking at behaviors of individuals that have made threats to try to, it's hard to predict the future, but what we try to do is see if there's any triggers or anything that's going on in their life that would maybe make them act out in that way. Also, a lot of people ask where we get these reports. How do we know if somebody is going to make a threat? So we do that through our tip line. We get calls from there. We also get schools. We have a relationship with JCPS and our private schools here in the community. So we'll get calls from them as well. We also are a patrol division. Someone calls 911, a business has had a threat because they fired an employee or something. So then we'll get those calls as well that are coming from a 911 center and they're over to us through our patrol divisions. And one thing that we do is we try to network and we work with these groups and these institutions and facilities so that when a threat does come in, they're more comfortable coming to us. They know we go out and we talk to them about helping with their procedures for if a threat does come in, how to report that to us, and what behaviors that may be alarming to them so that they know kind of what to look for. And we know there's always room for improvement. There's always new management techniques coming out, best practices related to threat management. And so as we move forward, Chief Shields has been great in supporting us with getting the training and the resources we need to help manage those threats as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Lieutenant Lauder, please introduce yourself for the record.
I'm Lieutenant Jeff Lauder with the Louisville Metro Police Department SWAT team. Thanks for having me here today. I want to talk about a couple different components related to the active shooter preparation for the department. The first one being training, resources, and then our response. So I'm going to start off with the basic academy. I have a lot of knowledge of it because I was there for some time as a sergeant. But right now, our recruits are getting a total of 220 hours of training during their academy class on skills that would pertain to responding to an active shooter. Those include your general weapons training with pistol, patrol rifle. They get 20 hours of CQT, which is close quarter tactics, which is the skills that they need to deploy those weapons properly and protect themselves and the people inside the building. They're getting 40 hours from our Homeland Security unit, which involves incident command, terrorism, suicide bombers, weapons of mass destruction, things like that. 16 hours of ICAT, which is Integrated Communications Assessment and Tactics. ICAT promotes just a better response to all sorts of things, and it encourages them to take a more tactical approach and bring their resources to bear instead of, de-escalation is a good word for that. They're getting 16 hours of the actual active aggressor training, which is just 2 days. And most of that is scenario training. 4 hours of tactical medicine and 4 hours of mechanical breaching, which is breaching doors with tools. Right now, the in-service is where we're trying to fill some gaps. The SWAT team has stepped up recently over the last couple of years to kind of help. It's a situation where it's a lack of manpower and being able to put enough people in training to kind of perform this training properly, and a lack of knowledge or people that are qualified to teach the tactics. Obviously, the SWAT team has a whole team of people who can teach that stuff. So over the last couple of years, we stepped up and helped. We teach close quarter tactics to recruits. We started this year teaching our Patrol 101 course, which is the in-service class for the officers that have less than 3 years on. It's kind of a refresher. They come back to get refreshed on all the skills they learned in the academy. We're doing a lot of roll call training for our divisions, which we're trying to touch everybody in the divisions because patrol is obviously the most important here. We also have a full-time training plan with our fugitive unit. We're also teaching breaching to the recruits, the divisions through roll call training, the fugitive unit, and our probationary training officers are coming starting next month to train on breaching and de-issue breaching tools. Some of the resources that we bring to bear in these situations obviously start with patrol. Each officer is issued a service pistol. They have a patrol rifle if they choose to carry one. They have to provide that themselves. They're issued a medical bag that includes everything that they might need to treat mostly massive hemorrhaging, stuff like that, to stop them bleeding so that we can maintain that life until we get into advanced medical care. We've been issued over the last, I think it was 2017 or 18, we got tactical vests with ballistic level 3 plates, which are rifle rated to stop rifle rounds from a 7.62, which is, typically an AK-47 or something.
Department-wide?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
In all divisions over the last year have been issued an active aggressor response kit. It's called an ARC bag. It's a large bag that they can grab and go. It contains, I'm not sure how many, but it contains at least 12 first aid kits, we call IFACs, that they can pass out on scene to victims so they can provide aid to themselves until we can provide for them. On the SWAT side, obviously, we bring a lot more breaching capabilities to a situation. We have snipers we can deploy. We bring distraction devices, commonly known as flashbangs, armored vehicles, OS and CS gas, which probably wouldn't come to bear in a situation like this, but in case it turned into a barricade, we have that. We have 3 robots, different robots that we utilize. SUAS, which is a drone, they can fly inside, and we have tactical medics on our team that deploy with us all the time. The difference between those medics and, say, a paramedic with EMS is that those medics will travel into the hot zone with us. They're protected, they wear the same gear that we wear, and they stay with us, and they'll go into that hot zone, whereas EMS would probably, because they're part of a rescue task force team, would go into, first they would go into the warm zone, like a CCB, which is a casualty collection. Just to speak to the response real quick, I'm just going to hit on a couple of main points from our department's policy. The department recognizes in its policy that the active aggressor needs to be stopped immediately to prevent any loss of life. The officers on scene are to initiate, manage, an immediate tactical response and neutralize an imminent threat of death or bodily harm. Responding officers have the authority to take immediate action to eliminate the threat. I'll come back to that point, but that could play a big part in Lauder. So, Metro Safety advises all channels that there's an active aggressor taking place, and all officers from all adjoining divisions will respond. The SWAT team will be paid immediately, and if certain offenses dictate, immediate entry may be made by any number of officers. Our policy right now recommends that you have a 4-man team. However, we're looking at modifying that to reflect more of a by any means necessary kind of approach. We started teaching officers single officer response, and it's much more effective to teach them that because it's a lot easier to learn than being part of a 4-man diamond formation where you're doing all kinds of complicated movements and everything else. So it kind of simplifies it. Pursuit of an act of aggression should be made as expediently as possible. So those are all key points out of our department's policy in response to act of aggressor. I'll tell you this, we have some needs. We have some places that we need to be shored of. The ballistic plates that I mentioned before, they expire next year. That's a very costly thing to provide those area officers. The current vests, they have to be put on before the officer responds. They're not part of their everyday carry. They wear a soft armor on the street every day. They would have to remove that vest and put this vest on, which causes more time. It's not a very efficient response. Like I said, those vests expire next year. There is a plan in place to try to phase in an ICW vest, armor vest, over the next 2 or 3 years, which would cost about $500,000 a year. The ICW stands for in conjunction with. That would be in addition to what they're currently wearing. So they could put that in there. It's 2 pounds on each side. It's a total of 4 pounds added to their vest. They wouldn't have to change the vest. They would protect them from rifles. The issue with patrol rifles. Right now, they have them if they own them, if they want to bring them. And if they have to use them, they don't see them for about 3 years because they're tied up in litigation and as evidence and everything else. So that's probably being conservative. 2000 to 2019, the FBI did a 20-year study, found that 144 long guns were used in active shooter events, 58 shotguns. So for an officer to deploy to an event like this, and we all see it all the time. I mean, the majority of the time it seems like they're bringing a rifle to the event. They would be woefully outmatched with their service pistol. So I think that's something. I think there's a plan in place. I talked to Lieutenant Rachel at our firearms training center, and I think there's a plan in place this year and next year to start issuing patrol rifles, which is a good thing. So we're heading in the right direction. We need to improve our breaching capabilities, which has already been put into place. We just purchased 200 sledgehammers and 200 pry bars. I told you that next month we start training probationary training officers on mechanical breaching. Those tools will be issued to them first, obviously because they train our patrol officers, so we want them to have them first. Maybe they can pass on some of the training to them. We will continue to train everybody as much as we can. Obviously, the manpower issue is a problem right now. With more people on the street, we have a much faster response, most likely. And we're bringing more people to the problem faster. It also provides more time for people to train. A lot of officers want to take more training, but they, when they have 6 to 8 people riding their squad, they can't get off. So that's the issue with training. It's very manpower intensive. So, and that's the last issue, that's the last need we have, more tactical training and focus on the officer's individual skills. We talk about a lot of scenarios that we run and all these large scale training events. I'll be honest, it's not doing a lot for the individual officer. Their role in that training may be nothing. They may stand around for 3 hours. There may be great training for somebody there or somebody way above them, but for the individual officer, it's usually they get one repetition and they're done for the day. So we need to start concentrating on focusing on their individual skills. The analogy I like to use is, when you play a sport, when you practice, you don't just play the game. You spend at least a portion of that time working on your small things, skills.
Lieutenant, excuse me.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump in here. I have a number of members in the queue. Okay. And if we have time, we have a hard stop at 4:30 because there's another committee right behind us. I have just a couple of questions, and I'll go through the queue. Number one, say, for example, and an active shooter event is kind of like fire insurance. We're talking about a topic here that we all pray will never happen. but to not be prepared for it is negligent. We owe the citizens that you serve and I represent these answers and to demonstrate preparedness. And Chief Shields, to your remarks, unfortunately, you left out a tragedy that occurred Sunday, 113 miles north of us in Indianapolis. In that area, in one of the Gannett reports, they said there were 3 large capacity loaded magazines found at the scene. And some of these, you're seeing duffel bags being carried. And I want to come back to my question real quick, but an observation at first, because we hear a lot of talk about militarization of police departments, and police departments need to be militarized when they're responding to something like this, when they're responding to something like this. Those armored vehicles you have are rescue vehicles. They're protective vehicles for the police officers. You load people in them, you put people beside them, and you have a movable barricade. Am I correct in that?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And you said it very well, Lieutenant Lauder, overmatched with a handgun. Frankly, overmatched with just the normal body-worn vest. So I'm pleased to hear that a level 3 is available to every police officer, especially given what happened just a couple of weeks ago to one of your own officers. The question I have is communications. Say something happens in Audubon Park. They have their own police department, they have a school, they have a number of shopping areas. Is there good coordination, or everybody trained the same? Everybody be able to talk on the radio the same? I saw a lot of standing around in the films from Uvalde. To me, it looked like there was no command and control, no clear line of communication or who was in charge, and just standing around while people were dying. So how would that work? Just today, Audubon Park is okay.
So we all share the same radio channels. They have ours, we have theirs. That's not an issue. Those calls that call would go through Metro Safe just like it would everybody else. They would put out the same notification. Our officers from 6th Division, the 5th Division would probably would respond to that situation. The page would be sent out to the SWAT team. What would likely happen is we would, as soon as we're on scene, LMPD would take command of the scene. That being the first officer on scene, and then when the commanding officer shows up, they assume command. And then once SWAT gets there, then I would assume command of the tactical operations, and then my major and special operations would assume command of the incident.
Thank you.
But communications is good.
But on scene, you can talk to the Shively officer, talk to the Anchorage officer, you can talk
yes, sir.
to the Audubon officer.
In almost every case, a detailed channel would be determined, and it would be then after we made everyone in this event switch to this channel, and that everybody in Jefferson County has those radio channels.
Perfect, thank you, Lieutenant.
Yes, sir.
Vice Chair Pete.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I don't know which of the two of you would like to answer this, and you started to touch on it just now with you used the phrase, when LMPD shows up, we will take charge. Are you, again, incident command system wise, is that normal? Is Audubon Park agreed that you will take over? And I'm going to go a next step. JCPS, now that they have formed their own deputized department, if there's an event at a school, who's in charge? Because going back to, again, Uvalde, part of the problem was it was an undermanned, undertrained, 5-person school police department. Even though there were probably better experts standing in the background. And so was it a command and control conflict? Was it professional courtesy that I'm not going to step on your toes? To me, how did that chief stay in charge for the duration of that incident?
Thank you, Councilman. I think to really appreciate that, you need to read a 77-page report. The failure across the board by so many sworn law enforcement from so many agencies is profound, which is why I hear, and I agree with Lieutenant Lauder, regardless of where we are, if it is in our jurisdiction, we take over. But I also have to ensure that people who are not at our level understand that's what is expected of them as well.
Well, and that's what I'm asking. Are they in agreement in advance before the event occurs?
That's the, folks don't have to agree. The point is, no one did anything in Uvalde, which is why there's 21 deceased. And so our training is, and my expectation is, we go and we either coordinate, as we did the time that it was in with Chief Sanders at the school. Yes, that, you know, there is that level of communication at some level, but no one is expecting, and I'm surely not, we're not going to wait around and see what unfolds. But I do think that where we have an obligation internally in LMPD is, it's not adequate that he and I understand that. There has to be that expectation and that absolute belief and knowledge and confidence in stepping out in and taking control of the situation. Reviewing our policy this morning, re-reviewing it, I'm not happy with it. It does say that we train on going in as in groups of 4 when I was in the mid-2000s in Atlanta. That has been out the window. That shouldn't even still be in our policy, and it is. People have to know you have a gun and a badge and a vest for a reason. Get in there. And so I have plans to intensify and step up our training, and if we have to outsource it because the capacity of our SWAT team to do everything is not realistic. That being said, our special response team, which is the understudy of SWAT, is large. They're doing a large amount of training. We're going to invest in more training in them. But no, we're not going to be complacent, and I'm not going to assume because we're a city that we know how to do it right. Because I'm telling you, when you look at the 23 agencies that failed in Uvalde, you're talking federal agencies, state, and local. So it's easy to say there's just 5 officers. But when you look at all the other agencies that were there, the State Patrol failed, the Border Patrol failed, the DEA failed, the Marshals failed. I mean, it's nauseating. And so we have to be the best trained and know that we know what we're doing.
Well, I'm going to go back to an event that actually occurred because I was there, and the lockdown at J-Town High School back at the beginning of the school year. The school system took charge, and long after the J-Town police had located the person we were looking for in his apartment across the street, that whole lockdown process continued all the way to the very, very end, all the way to vacating everyone out to the football field and then shuttling them in buses down to Talley Elementary with, after the fact, for their parents to meet them. And again, it was all because they started a process that was theirs and wouldn't stop. And that goes back to my original question, who's in charge? Because we can stand here in this meeting and go, it will be us. But there's the one event I have within the last calendar year, and it wasn't.
No, I'll disagree somewhat, because LMPD did not stand by and just watch. There were absolutely well-documented issues with how JCPS handled it, and their procedure for handling incidents. But what should be noted is the police agencies that did respond made entry.
Oh, no, I'm not questioning that. You did that part. I mean, again, I was in that building as a teacher. I know you made entry. Everybody did great. Procedures were followed. It was quite fascinating, to be perfectly honest, from a glad it wasn't real kind of way. But I'm just saying, it was only after the fact that even some of your own officers learned that, why are we still here? The J-Town found this guy across the street 45 minutes into this event. And yet we still have kids being locked in closets, held in rooms, being shuttled out. And again, everybody just saying, well, once we got started, it was just easier to continue the point. I mean, continue through the process. Even as police officers started to leave, JCPS is still following through with their procedures because, again, it's because no one said